Hello and welcome everyone to our session number 9 on mindfulness of thoughts. And I'm calling this one Wise Discernment of Thoughts. So we've been working a lot at the ultimate level, looking at the insubstantial nature or the not self nature of thoughts. Thoughts are not facts, and I'm not my thoughts. And what thoughts do you believe, and how a believed thought causes suffering. Today, I'm going to speak more at what we can call the relative level. So it's really important with all our mindfulness work, is to really see how we can work at both the relative level and the ultimate level. The relative level meaning the content, kind of what we see as our everyday life, this form and the world around it, and the ultimate level being more the realm of emptiness, of the insubstantial, ephemeral nature of reality. So you could kind of talk about the relative realm being the realm of karma, where there's action and reaction and consequences, and the ultimate being the realm of emptiness, just nature arising. And we work at both levels because we can actually become attached to either level. We can become attached to the realm of emptiness and ignore the world of form. So nothing really matters. Everything's empty and everything's an illusion, so it doesn't really matter what I do. That would be a signal that one might be attached to the dimension of the ultimate dimension. Where most of us are attached is the realm of the relative realm. We're attached to the content of our lives, the body, thoughts, emotions, sort of all these experiences, perceptions, and so on. But you can actually be attached to either realm. So it's important to look at both and to look at the interplay between both. And we've been doing that over I guess you could say over the years in this group. So I'd like to today. I'm going to probably it's going to seem like I'm really talking at the relative level because I will be, and it's helpful because we have these thought patterns that keep arising. So how do we work with them? What's the practice? What did the Buddha teach? In particular, I'm going to look at what the Buddha taught in terms of how to work with thoughts. So the Dhammapada, verse 35, it's quoted as saying, "The active mind is difficult to tame. Flightingly and wandering wherever it wills. Taming it is essential, leading to the joy of well-being." So does that ring any bells for people? Does that seem the active mind is difficult to tame? I mean, if you've been trying to tame the mind, in a way that could be part of the problem, but it's just seeing that it's flighty and it just wanders wherever it wills. I mean, it's without your consent, thoughts arise, and we've looked at that. And basically, the sutta is saying that taming of it is essential. So at the very relative level, there is a process of taming the mind, without getting too kind of hung up on changing what is arising in our practice as well. So taming in the mind isn't resisting what's arising in the mind. So that's an important distinction. This can be hard to sometimes get that, to grok that there is a very big difference between what was being called taming the mind or training the mind, and resisting what's arising in the mind. And I'll talk more about that. And we can see it in our meditations as well, right? When you sit down to meditate, often there's an active mind. Does that happen for everybody, or is it just me? You sit down, and for yesterday you had a great meditation, at least that you evaluated it that way, which is a trap in itself. And then, the mind's just this and that, and all these fleeting thoughts, or even more disturbing or bothersome thoughts. So we practice with it in our meditation, and we're practicing with it in our daily lives. So how to practice with thoughts? So on a relative level, it's important that we discern between skillful and unskillful thoughts, or thoughts. What I've been saying, thoughts that are stressful or harmful, and thoughts that are not stressful or harmful. And we can, in a way, we investigate the content of what's arisen. That we bring that capacity of investigation, just to really see, is this a skillful or unskillful thought, a stressful, harmful thought or not? And we abandon the unskillful thoughts and cultivate the skillful thoughts. Sounds really simple, right? We're noticing the ingrained, that what we talked about, papancha, where a thought will arise, and then a story around it will arise, and you can often even feel it in an emotional sense arising in the body. The whole stressful thinking that starts to proliferate. And it's often a repeated pattern, very ingrained and repeating. So that's another thing to look for. Oh, is this a stressful thought pattern that just keeps coming up again and again? That's another indicator that it's an unskillful thought pattern. So we start just by being attentive to thoughts arising. Like if we're not kind of watchful, we'll use that word. I find that word helpful. Just being watchful. It's a little maybe stronger than noticing. I use noticing a lot, right? Noticing, actually probably the word I use the most in guided meditations. But I'm bringing this kind of this element of watchfulness, just being kind of on the lookout for thoughts, and then using our wise discernment to say, okay, is this a skillful thought, an unskillful thought, wholesome thought, unwholesome thought, and seeing that. So the first is really being attentive to what's arising as thoughts. And you'll see a lot of fleeting thoughts. You notice that too. Sometimes the thoughts will just go fleet through the mind. They don't have any juice to them, right? They just they arise and pass. And then there's another one that'll arise and poof, something grabs onto it, and the process of papancha or proliferation can begin. So you could say there's kind of two types of thoughts. There's the fleeting thoughts. You just kind of notice, arise, pass, take out the garbage, pass. So, did I, little thoughts about cooking, or, what should I cook? God, just arises, pass. And then the other types of thoughts are more ingrained, repetitive, and produce a kind of stress in the body mind. So really kind of noticing those two. For the fleeting thoughts, you're just kind of noticing and seeing them. it's really often quite more of a simple process, right? You're just kind of noticing and seeing it. You could get a little more precise even. You could even notice, oh, I noticed that fleeting thought at the beginning, or I noticed that fleeting thought in the middle, or I noticed that fleeting thought, after it actually arose and passed away. So you could get a little more precise in your noticing as you practice with fleeting thoughts. But there's no need to label them. That whole process of labeling as a story or planning or whatever it might be. There's no use to label the fleeting thoughts. Just kind of notice and see them, and perhaps notice when they're seen, beginning, the middle, or the end. A quote from Suzuki Roshi, the early Zen teacher that came to the West, and someone I often quote in this group. If something comes into your mind, let it come in and let it go out. It will not stay long. When you try to stop your thinking, it means you are bothered by it. Do not be bothered by anything. If you're not bothered by the waves, gradually they will become calmer and calmer. When you try to stop your thinking, it means you are bothered by it. Do not be bothered by anything. So it's very instructive, but always check in with your attitude about allowing things to be. So meditation is not about stopping thoughts, as you all know. Meditation is not about judging that you're thinking. It's simply what minds do. Minds secrete thoughts the way the environment produces sounds. So you first develop this capacity just to be aware of fleeting thoughts, nothing more. Then check your attitude. Are you bothered by the fact that you're having fleeting thoughts? And noticing that. And remembering that we bring this attitude of allowing whatever arises to just be as part of this practice. So that's the, I guess you could say, the easy one, right? The fleeting thoughts is kind of, I guess you could say, it comes rather quickly. There's no juice to them, right? So it's just kind of, there's thought, there's a thought. The one that presents perhaps some challenges is practicing with more ingrained, repetitive, stressful thoughts, the proliferating, repeating, and thoughts that often have deep, strong habit patterns to them. So we need another means to practice with these, another skillful means. So just noticing isn't enough. People have written books, mindfulness is not enough, and they're kind of looking at this aspect of just seeing isn't enough. There needs to be some investigation and some discernment as well in this practice. So these thoughts, we are bothered by them because we get caught up in them. There's something that bothers us. That's why they have some juice. So we get caught up in them. So it needs something more than what is commonly described as mindfulness. I mean, sati, the Pali word sati is translated as mindfulness. It's more than just seeing. It's got this discerning capacity to it. So you can actually kind of see it as kind of being watchful of what's arising, and then discerning, investigating and discerning what is being seen. the Buddha actually talked about at times as guarding the mind and protecting us from unskillful thought patterns. There's a sutta called the sutta, Buddhist sutta called the two kinds of thoughts. And I'm going to read it from this for a bit, fairly lengthy quote. Bhikkhus, practitioners, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I set on one side thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty. And I set on the other side thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of sensual desire, or you could say ill will or cruelty, arose in me. I understood thus. This thought has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and into the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from nibbana. When I considered this leads to my own affliction, it subsided in me. And so on. When it leads to others' affliction, it subsided in me. So whenever a thought of sensual desire or ill will or cruelty arose in me, I abandoned it and did away with it. So it's just kind of saying that reflection that the arising of this pattern is simply leads to my own affliction, the affliction of others, is enough to kind of lead us to a letting go of that thought pattern. And this is important. The Buddha goes on to later say, and this is one of his most quoted quotes, whenever a bhikkhu, which means monk, but it actually refers to all practitioners, whenever a bhikkhu frequently thinks, whatever a bhikkhu frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of the mind. So he's really pointing to the importance of guarding the mind in that way, because what you think on and ponder on, that becomes kind of a rut. I mean, in the neurological sense, it becomes a neural pathway that becomes more and more developed as those neurons fire together. So he's pointing to a deep teaching there in that sentence. So the repetition of these thoughts strengthens the neural pathways and in the brain, it makes them easier for those to reoccur again in the future. It's this repetition. So later the Buddha goes on. This is a great sutta. He goes on and describes a cow herder. And of course, this was 2,500 years ago or more. And that was more of those kind of analogies, agrarian analogies were what was most often used. But hopefully it works for those of us who, I imagine a few of you have never been cow herders, but hopefully it speaks to you at some level anyway. And how a cow herder herds cows. And if you can think of this as how you can sort of work with thoughts. The cows are thoughts. The cow herder is you. So when crops are growing, the cow herder must protect the crops. So they watch the cows very carefully. And if they start to stray into the fields where the crops are, they have to kind of poke them away. So they have to be very watchful of the cows when the crops are in. And when there's no crops in the field, the herder doesn't need to prevent the cows from straying into the field. They only have to be sort of watchful of where the cows are. Right? They're just kind of, okay, there's a cow, make sure they don't wander too far, but it's kind of more relaxed attitude. So the Buddha said that we should be mindful of thoughts in the same way. So I think he's kind of pointing to how, we can, fleeting thoughts arise, and there's a thought, just be kind of watchful that it doesn't proliferate into a new thought train. I'll just kind of watch it arise and fall away. And then, oh, here's a thought that's got some stress and some juice to it. I'll need to be more watchful and investigative and discerning with this thought pattern. Because if we're not watchful in this way, we can kind of unwittingly reinforce these unskillful thought patterns, and these that lead to suffering, or as the Buddha said, the affliction of ourselves, the affliction of others, and the affliction of both. So it's this kind of wise discernment that can distinguish between skillful and unskillful, so that we can abandon the unskillful and cultivate the skillful. So this is seeing what thoughts are thoughts of, as the Buddha said, sensual desire, ill will, or greed. The wanting thoughts, the desire thoughts, or ill will towards others, or greed, cruelty, as it was translated in the translation that I read. It's kind of those three poisons. So it's really discerning. Oh, is this a thought pattern that would fit into those three poisons? And we simply acknowledge that these thought patterns have arisen. And we just kind of poke them like the cowherder would poke them so they don't remain. Let them go. Abandon them. This the translation is often translated as abandoning unskillful mind states. And check your attitude as one is doing this. It's not an attitude of resistance. I was going to say it's not an attitude of judgment, and it isn't, because discernment is it's different. It's a different quality to it. So it's without judgment, without resisting, simply seeing, this thought pattern causes suffering. And in my practice, I've noticed that, in fact, in the sutta, the way the Buddha described it, he didn't say, well, I notice it and then I push it away, and it's just, and he noticed it, and thus it was abandoned. So it's really just the noticing that this thought pattern has arisen. Wise discernment sees it as causing, as being unskillful or unwholesome, and seeing that, this is causing my own suffering or the suffering of others. It's in that seeing that it is let go quite naturally. And see it as more of a natural process of letting go than a resisting and pushing away. So check in on that attitude that you're bringing to it. And this, the way I'm describing it can sound simple, but it can be tricky. The mind can rationalize around unskillful thought patterns, stressful thought patterns that you may see this as a thought of ill will. And the mind may, but they deserve it. Look what they did. Da, 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 da. Right? They deserve it. I was trying to watch just a bit of a tangent, but might be instructive on how our culture actually feeds into this kind of process. I was trying to watch a movie to watch, and I'd look at the description, and so many of them were about getting vengeance. And the plot line was, well, the person deserves it. So I actually watched one, and I won't tell you what it is because it was terrible, but it was a whole process of almost, I felt like I was being manipulated. That the mind was being manipulated to, and I was feeling emotional, the emotions of the manipulation, that this person deserved the vengeance that was falling upon them. This kind of vigilante kind of almost perspective. So our culture encourages this kind of rationalization of thoughts of ill will in particular, I find. Where you can have thoughts of, sensory desire, and you can say, well, but I deserve this. I worked hard, and there's a whole rational, I deserve it. And but looking at how it causes suffering is really what's called for. So be kind of on the lookout for those rationalizing thoughts that come after wise discernment. You might kind of sometimes twist them back around, and watch what you feed the mind in terms of the media and movies and books and so on, because a lot of those there's not a lot of wise discernment I'm finding in a lot of the media that's out there. In fact, it's quite the opposite of what I would call wise discernment. So just be aware that the mind can be tricky in this way, to be on the lookout for those kinds of thought patterns. So this is the kind of the guarding function of mindfulness, the waiting, the watching and waiting for thoughts. I think I told you for a while I was practicing with thoughts. I pictured an open door, like it's just a space with no physical door on it, and then I would just look at that open door, and I would wait for thoughts to appear in the door frame. There's a thought. There's a fleeting thought. Oh, there's a thought. It's coming through the door. It's got some juice. It's got some. There's some history there. Oh, I see some charge to this thought. Noticing. Oh, what is this? Is this the thought of desire, of ill will, of greed, and discerning that? So that's kind of the watchful nature that we can practice in our meditations. I think this is very useful as a meditation to do as a guided meditation, or just with yourself. I always start with the body, sensing into the body, and then move to this kind of looking at the thought door. And again, remembering to check the attitude of the mind. If you feel bothered by the thoughts that are arising, then you have a problem. Suzuki Roshi would say, and the thoughts are not the problem. It is your attitude that that the thoughts shouldn't be there. That's the problem. Yeah. And Suzuki, I would love the Q&As with Roshi. They'd ask you, go, yeah, you have a problem. I go, yeah, that's what I'm telling you. I have a problem. Yeah, your problem is you think you have a problem. The thoughts, you're bothered by the thoughts. It's not the thoughts that are the problem. It's that you're bothered by that you think the thoughts are a problem is a problem. And a student would always think, oh, he finally gets me. He gets my problem. Kind of turns around, and it's not a problem at all. Kind of like the Buddha's 83 problems. People remember that one. And guy says, I can solve your 82 problems that you have, but not the 83rd problem. And so what's the 83rd problem? It's the fact that you believe you have problems. It's your 83rd problem. I'm paraphrasing a lot there, but it's again the idea of kind of checking your attitude of what you're identifying as a problem. Thoughts are not the problem. Thoughts will come without your consent, without any doing on your part, and you can't stop them. And in fact, the more you try to stop them, the bigger the problem becomes, the non-problem. So far, this is all I'm talking about, and I'll finish up in a minute. We're talking about mindfulness of thoughts on a relative level. So we're talking about the content of thought rather than the nature of thought. And you can also practice looking at, well, what is a thought? And we've talked about this actually in previous sessions. And the practice there is directing the mind to really look and inquire at the nature of thought and seeing it's empty, insubstantial, not self nature. And I won't go into that too much, but just to point out that we'll be exploring this in some greater detail, some more detail, because we've already explored it somewhat as we go forward. So I'll just open it up for any questions, comments about the talk or anything else that's coming up in people's practice.
I
Okay.
I was looking forward to this conversation. Um, I've been practicing this now for probably a year and a half, couple of years, where I'm, just watching the breath, getting really calm, then sort of switching to. I think I heard somebody else say this before, and I use the same metaphor internally. Is it's like the cat watching the mouse hole to see what's going to come out of the mouse hole. Either way, it doesn't matter. I actually really enjoy that, and to be honest, I find it better than any movie out there on Netflix. The problem that I'm having is putting this into practice in off the cushion, so to speak, in real life. I keep setting this intention that I'm going to do this during the day, and then the next day comes and I say, well, I don't think I really did that very much yesterday. I'm wondering if you have any words of wisdom or suggestions as far as how to take this off the cushion, and because from some of the things that I've been reading, people have really made some incredible strides when they figure out how to get this off the cushion. So
Yeah. Yeah. So how to bring the practice from your formal meditation into what we sometimes call daily life, which is where the the rubber hits the road in terms of the practice, especially at a relative, in the realm of the relative. And I had this question for many years as I was practicing and trying to figure out how to do it, in a sense, how to bring that transition. And I never figured anything out in terms of how to do it. I just kept practicing, and what I started to notice was that it was kind of bleeding over into daily life, just kind of this kind of bleeding forward to the point where I started to notice that oh, I'm noticing the same kinds of things that I notice when I'm meditating. Oh, isn't that interesting? And the fact that you're noticing that you're not noticing is also noticing, right? You said, well, I notice in my daily life that, I'm not as aware of, of what's perhaps arising. And of course, you're not going to be staring at a rabbit hole as you go through your daily life, or a mouse hole, or I forget the metaphor, but you're going to be noticing the full range of what can happen. And that full range is not in a controlled environment where you're probably sitting in a quiet place with your eyes closed, perhaps. And that's very, the sensory input is quite limited. You're out there, the full onslaught of sight, sound, smells, triggers, buttons being pushed, and so on. Relationships, which we've been talking about, and how difficulties can arise there. So there's a big difference between the two in that sense, in the sense and range of sensory input. So you're just that it's just the noticing that keeps spilling over. So noticing that you're not noticing is huge. Then you'll start to notice, oh, I did notice. Look at that. That person that in that relationship kind of did something that I might have been triggered. I wasn't triggered, or I was triggered, but I noticed, right? So you start to, it starts to bleed through. I remember I started kind of noticing more after. Say, oh, wow, that just happened. And I just kind of come back to the body, right? Oh, that was stressful. And I just come back and I kind of settle in. I almost go back into my almost a meditation posture, because I know that I just went through, the body was stressed. So that's kind of how it started. And then it just kind of started to bleed into more during the event. So that, I see stress arising. I can feel it in the body. And then it started to bleed more into, there's something that is normally triggering. There's something that, and just kind of noticing it at the beginning. So it will bleed through, but there's no how to. And one thing I might say, if you want a word of wisdom, I don't know that I have it, but is maybe move away a little bit from the rabbit hole idea, and just move to a more open awareness to what's happening, an open presence. Because open presence is a little closer to open awareness during the day than a very focused attention is. Right. So when we're aware of our breath at our nose, it's very focused. Whereas, of course, being aware in daily life is very expansive. So maybe be more expansive in your formal meditation, maybe a step closer to that more expansive awareness during the rest of the day. Because you hit it bang on. We don't meditate to become good meditators. We meditate so that it affects how we live our lives, and enables us to see our true nature.
Can I add one little bit to this?
Certainly.
I think I became more motivated to try to pay attention after a retreat that we did. You were leading in a few years back, and you were doing a talk like you just did, and you were talking away, and then all of a sudden you stopped and you said, I just had this thought that you guys are probably sitting here thinking I should probably stop talking. I don't know if you remember that, but it really struck me that while you're talking and you're trying to synthesize your thoughts and communicate, you actually became aware of thoughts that were just swirling around, between the two ears. And it was interesting for me to sit there and see that happen to somebody. And I think that was actually helpful.
Any other any questions, comments? Yes, Anita.
Um, so just relating to what you're talking about thoughts and how, and then, relate, how to react to them or the experience of it. So tonight, when I first sat down, I was quite wound up and, my mind was still thinking about the thing I was working on, which was quite detailed. And, here I am trying to sort of focus on the breath, and my mind keeps jumping back to, what I was doing and trying to sort of leave off and just, but that's not at least how my mind works. So it was a transition from, I didn't get time to sort of come down from what I was doing. And I was aware of the phasing in or phasing out of that and the phasing into the breath awareness and then some thoughts would come to me and I think, oh, I want to think about that for a minute. And then I think, well, I'm supposed to be meditating. And I thought, but this feels good. This is good. I can focus and this is nice. And to me, I guess what I took from that and what you've been saying tonight is my experience of tonight was good for me. And I didn't have any harmful thoughts, but was I strictly speaking really focused on the breath and really meditating? Sometimes. And yet the whole thing was calming, centering, helpful. And so I guess it comes down to unique experience, noticing and then, letting it go or holding on a minute, whatever works kind of thing. And I wasn't aware that I wasn't able to center at first, maybe. And then, but eventually I did. So I found that kind of an interesting experience in the context we were talking about. So thought I'd share.
Thank you. Yeah, what you just said really points to the central importance of attitude, the attitudes that we bring to the practice, right? So, and that you come from work where the mind is just so central. Perhaps I know in your work is in many of our jobs, our mind is it's happening between here. A lot of what we do. And then to just transition to that, to sit in a chair on a cushion and feel your breath in your belly, like they're kind of really different activities. And you notice that the mind wasn't settled, right? And that's just what the mind is. If it doesn't bother you, it's not a problem. So you felt calm, even though the mind was busy, because it's not a problem. And that's really more about the attitude. You can sit down for your meditation and just notice, oh, look at that mind. So busy. It's just jumping all over the place. It's like when I put popcorn in the popcorn thing, it's like boop, boop, pop, thought, 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 thought. And isn't that interesting? It just is. And you can actually sit there and you don't have to follow trains of thoughts. But if you follow one for a while, look what happened. I followed a train of thought for a while. Isn't that interesting? And just bringing that, one of the 7 factors of enlightenment is equanimity, and you bring that sense of equanimity to whatever arises, including a busy mind, then it can feel very freeing, even with a busy mind. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yes, Alifia. Yeah.
Well, basically, everybody would like to a healthy and happy life. So meditation does help. It is true. It's like in a busy life, we never give a little time to sit down and relax. So this half an hour meditation is really helpful. And we are talking about thoughts. So that is true, like controlling the anger or situations, and think before you talk, make sure what you're talking is helpful, and keeping patience and always helpful, is thankful, whatever you got it, that keep you with peace,
Yeah.
And, keep struggling to get the best and whatever effort it requires to do that.
Yeah.
So is there a comment? You had a question?
That's it. Thanks. I was happy to attend this.
It's great to have you here. Yeah, it's beautiful having the two of you or the family together.
I'm just visiting her from Houston. I'm from Texas, Houston,
Oh, okay, nice. Okay, nice. Yeah, you hit so many different aspects of the practice. I mean, gratitude, bringing the patience. And I'm not going to tell my patience story because this group has all heard it so many times, but that was something I worked with for many years. Just, so many of those factors that we bring into the practice. How to relate to anger when it arises, which is an emotion based on believed thoughts. So it's very much connected to, what we've been talking about here in terms of thoughts, mindfulness of thoughts. Yeah, so many beautiful, beautiful factors that we bring to this practice that can, as you say, lead to a sense of well-being and happiness. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so next, I am away next week, and Jason will be giving the guided meditation and the talk. So it'll be on the topic of mindfulness of thoughts. I don't know if I'll be able to send out an email. I have a feeling it'll probably be more at the ultimate level, but I don't know. So yeah, that'll be perhaps a surprise. But if he sends me something and I can send it out to you, I will. I will be hiking in Yoho National Park in Jasper with my son and his fiance, and his fiance's Stephanie's parents. So this could be, it'll be our first time together. We've met them, but then we'll be spending several days hiking in the mountains and sleeping and backpacking in the mountains with them. So I should perhaps have some interesting practice stories to share when I get back. We'll see. I'm looking forward to it though. Yeah, so the Skyline Trail is the trail we're doing. So yeah, but you'll be in good hands with Jason. And thank you everyone for coming. I'm still amazed how what's the word, how determined and committed you are to this practice to come regular throughout the, the summer months like this. And I enjoy this time I spend with you every Thursday night. I'll miss you while I'm in the mountains, but take care.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Stephen.
Stephen. Bye, everybody.
Hope to see you. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Stephen. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a nice trip. Thanks
I
all.
will. Thank you.
Have a
Take
good
care.
trip. Thank you. Bye,
You're welcome.
everybody.
Bye.